I'd like to just sit still and meditate on that for a while. It reminds me, and of course I go to Unity teaching, where the words of Charles Fillmore, who when he was speaking about one of his 12 powers, that of love, he said, don't limit its power in your life to mere human affection or even romance. He would have loved that song. Love is all I am. We say we're an expression of God's love for life. And that can be the guide of how we live in this world, how we relate to one another, how we speak of that great outer world, and how we act from a place of love. Now, coming from Kansas City, my hometown, I know what it is to get wrapped up in a Hallmark approach to love. Isn't it grand? Isn't it sweet? Let's hug. But in unity, just like all of these powers that Charles idealized as God's gift to the human being, love is far more significant than affection. Affection can express love, but it's just a beginning. And speaking of beginnings, this Fourth Sunday of Lent, we have a couple of weeks to go on our journey toward Easter. And if you want your Easter, along the lines of what Mr. Fillmore said about love, if you want your Easter to be more than pastel colors, beautiful decorated eggs, pretty outfits, your Sunday best, if you want your Easter to be more than that, and inner joy, wonder, and gratitude for life's renewal, the possibilities that you can know in your life, in healing and prospering, in harmonizing relationships, of you realizing your place in this world as a beneficial, helpful presence, all of that requires us on this Lenten journey to be open to new possibilities, to take up what is ours to do, to be willing to make an effort. And that willingness, that openness, that vulnerability is a popular word these days, but there's truth in it, to soften the heart, as our daily word spoke, to be willing to change in how we see ourselves, how we see one another, how we see the stranger on the road. Asks a lot of us. But we ask a lot of life. So why shouldn't life ask a lot from us? Well, we continue this journey of Lent. And today I wanted to speak of a powerful tool, a perspective, an approach, a toolkit that you can apply in your life and make a tremendous difference. It is a powerful way for you to meet life. I like the more modern phrase, it's awesome sauce for your life. It's a way to greet life and make a difference for yourself, for others. And by tradition, it's called the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes most extensively are revealed in Matthew's Gospel, the very opening of what is called the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus climbed the mount to teach before thousands. Now, Luke, in his gospel, saw it in a different way. And he named the same teachings the Sermon on the Plain instead of the Sermon on the Mount. We don't know exactly why that happened, but the important part is they brought the same truth of Jesus, sort of Jesus' teachings in a nutshell. If you grasp the Beatitudes and the rest of that Sermon on the Mount, then you kind of know what Jesus was about. And Jesus said, if you know me, you know the Father, you know the truth, you know the Spirit, because I'm allowing it to shine through me. For I am love. Myrtle Fillmore made a statement. Charles didn't do all the talking in unity. Myrtle made the statement to those who wrote to her for advice on the path of the true student. And she said, you'll know that you're on the right track by an inner sense of satisfaction. Now, I don't know about you, but that word satisfaction brings to my mind, I'm satisfied with that new jar of peanut butter I got. I'm satisfied with the clothes I put on today. But Myrtle meant something different. Satisfaction was a sense for Myrtle of how we end our service every week with a prayer for protection. And what do we say at the end? And all is well. Now, for visitors to Unity, that may sometimes be an odd statement. Perhaps they're struggling with life this very week and they hear us say, and all is well. I've actually heard people after a service say, well, it isn't. I've got troubles. I've got problems. I hurt. But that all is well is a perspective on life that Myrtle called satisfaction, meaning that we know God has given us inner abilities to meet life, to meet the world in victory. Or the Fillmores like to tell people, remember, you are an overcomer. Jesus said, in this life you will have trials and tribulations, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. The I is the truth within you. That can overcome any obstacle in your way. But we really have to get to the meat to understand that. I was thinking of a wonderful story. It's called The Farmer's Son. It comes from the wisdom of the Buddhist tradition. One day in late summer, an old farmer was working in his field with his old, sick, tired horse. The farmer felt compassion for the horse and desired to lift its burden of work. So he let his horse loose so that it could make its way to the mountains, to the wild forests, and live out the rest of its life without the burden of work. Soon after, neighbors from the nearby village visited, offered all their condolences, and said, "What a shame. Now your only horse is gone. How unfortunate you are. You must be very sad. How will you live, work the land, and prosper?" The farmer replied, "Who knows? We shall see." 2 days later, the old horse came back, rejuvenated after meandering on the mountainsides while eating wild grasses, he came back with 12 younger, healthier horses that followed the old horse back into the corral. Word got out around the village of this good fortune, and it wasn't long before all the neighbors showed up to congratulate the farmer on his good luck. "How fortunate you are," they exclaimed. "You must be very happy." And again the farmer said, "Who knows? We shall see." At daybreak on the next morning, the farmer's only son set off to attempt to train the new wild horses, but was thrown to the ground and broke his leg. One by one, the villagers arrived during the day to bemoan the farmer's latest misfortune. "Oh, what a tragedy! Oh, you won't be able to work your farm without your son's help." So the old farmer replied once again, "Who knows? We shall see." Several days later, war broke out. The emperor's men arrived in the village demanding that all the young men come with them to be conscripted into the emperor's army. As it happened, the farmer's son was deemed unfit to serve because of his broken leg. "What very good fortune you have," the villagers exclaimed as their own young men were marched away to battle. "You must be very happy." "Who knows?" the farmer said. "We shall see." As time went on, the broken leg healed and the son was left with a slight limp. And again the neighbors came to pay their condolences. "Oh, what bad luck. Too bad for you. Your son will never be a good worker." And the farmer replied, "Who knows? We shall see." As the time went on, the young men that had gone off to war, very few of them survived. And it turned out that this farmer and his son with a limp were the only men left in the whole region. So they took control of all the farms around and became wealthy as they worked the land. The villagers, once again, all excited, said, "How fortunate you are. You must be very happy." And the old farmer consistently replied, "Who knows? We shall see." Jesus taught a similar perspective. Wisdom is wisdom, regardless of what part of humanity it arises from. And he taught to see the ever-changing circumstances of our human story and how we relate, how we connect. The farmer was wise because he knew not to harden his response and just be entirely joy or entirely sad. He knew that we always adjust to life's changes. So these Beatitudes are an approach that Jesus taught the people that they could take to life. You know them perhaps best from the beautiful poetry that comes to us from the King James Version of the Bible. So I'll take it from there. Jesus began, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for truth's sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake, for the sake of truth. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets and the wise ones who went before you. Well, one can meditate on those 9 Beatitudes, but we still have to find a way to make them practical in our own life. Well, I've been inspired by the translation of the Beatitudes from Jesus' own language of Aramaic, because sometimes, or most times, it brings a new meaning, a deeper understanding, at least for me. And it reminds me again that this journey of discovery that we're on during the time of Lent, what happens sometimes when you're on a journey of exploration or discovery? Sometimes you encounter things that you've met many times before and you think, been there, done that. Or poetic words, like the words from the King James Version of the Bible, become old hat. Blessed are the meek. Great. Let's all be meek. So sometimes it's good to shift our perspective and hear the truth expressed differently. Now, I wish I had the time to explore the Aramaic of each of these 9 Beatitudes, but we'll have to do a class on that. But I want to pick out some that spoke to me. These are drawn from the scholarly work of Neil Douglas Klotz, one who's done a great amount of work working with the Aramaic root language that we know Jesus spoke. And as a matter of fact, I recently read a scholarly article. For a long time, there's been this debate. Where do we go to understand these early Christian scriptures? Do we go to the Greek or do we go to Aramaic? Some felt that Jesus' oral teachings were first written in Greek, with the background of Greek philosophy shaping them. Now scholars are beginning to think, it was really more likely that Jesus was speaking in his language of Aramaic, and it was written down in that language. And the difference between Aramaic and Greek is quite substantial. Sometimes it sounds all Greek to me. Pardon. I just couldn't resist that. So just listen. This first beatitude reminds me of the affirmation that Daily Word gave us this morning of softening the heart. And if you were listening closely, today's Daily Word, they're always helping me and supporting me. Today's Daily Word ends with scripture from the Gospel of Luke, which is Luke's version of these Beatitudes. Don't judge, and you won't be judged. Don't condemn, and you won't be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Healthy are those who have softened what is rigid within. They shall receive physical vigor and strength from the universe. Making oneself soft, vulnerable, open and the universe will infill your openness with power and strength and vigor. Blessed are those who from their inner wombs birth mercy. They shall feel its warm arms embrace them. Aligned with the one are those whose lives radiate from a core of love. They shall see God, possibility, everywhere. Blessed are those who plant peace each season. They shall be named the children of God, the children of the infinite. Blessed are those who are dislocated, put out of place for the cause of justice. Their new home is the province of the universe. Now, there's a little trick to the Beatitudes from whatever tradition or language you draw them. Jesus gave a bittersweet ending to them, perhaps even a discouragement. In the language of the King James, it's, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Drawn from the Aramaic understanding, renewal when you are reproached and driven away by the clamor of evil on all sides for my sake, for the sake of truth. Then do everything extreme, including letting your ego disappear. For this is the secret of claiming your expanded home in the universe. In unity we say, be open, be receptive, make friends with change in your life. We have difficult times, but put it in perspective. I believe difficult times have existed throughout human history, not just 2025. We can go back and look at how hard it was to get along, that sometimes in human history to even survive. And now it seems our entire planet is like all of those time periods at once. We have people in this world by disasters, so-called disasters of nature, war, struggling to just physically survive. We have others that just have difficulty in their own society, difficulty with conflict, with not understanding, with choosing sides. Are you with me or against me? But the time comes when we have to realize, as Jesus taught, what am I going to do about what I face? A good friend in Unity recently described what difficulty she was having with trouble in our society, in our midst, people not getting along, judging one another, difficulty. And she said, James, I know from my Unity teaching, I've been around Unity a long time, I know I'm supposed to look at all of this trouble and make peace with it and say, well, somehow divine order is at work. And I said, I don't know, somehow I feel it differently because I grew up in a traditional church. And when we looked at the trouble in the world or in our own individual lives, we were taught to say, with patience and submission, it's God's will. I just totaled my car. I just broke up in a relationship. Well, I know, it's God's will. No, it is not God's will. God's will is for your healing, your blessing. So I said to my friend, I think the trouble we get in when we talk of unity's spiritual principles, the 12 powers here, these are keys to our inner work. Not a medicine or a poultice that we throw on the outer world. Get over it, Kelly. Here's a blob of divine will. Spread that around your life. Divine will is for me to realize, like Jesus' Beatitudes, here's a challenge, here's a difficulty in my life. What am I going to do about it? The spiritual principle is not for me to go out in the world and fix everything. It's to help me fix and harmonize my relationship with others and with the world. And I believe Jesus taught and gave us these tools in the Beatitudes. Whatever you face in life, what are you willing to be? How are you willing to show up in your life, in your community, in a way that brings something constructive, helpful into the mix? You know, I enjoy the counselor, life coach, teacher, Dr. Maria Nemeth, and her classic statement to her readers and her students. What are you willing to be so that God, that is good, can come out of this situation? That is the truth. That is something for us to consider. So let's take a moment and take that one idea and hold it in a time of silence as if we were planting a seed of a new possibility in our soul. So I invite you to turn your attention within and together with me to hold this Jesus thought, this possibility. Aligned with the one are those whose lives radiate from a core of love. Then they shall see God, good possibilities everywhere. So for a moment in the silence, ask the Spirit of truth, always available, the goodwill of God, always desiring to guide you if you simply ask. What in my life have I made rigid and hard in my relationship to others and to the world? How am I willing to soften my heart, to see a new possibility in my relationship with the world? As we rest in the silence.